welcome to this episode of Let's Talk 716 Sports. My special guest is Ryan Thomas, and we will be talking Buffalo Bills football. How's your night so far?
It's going good. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Who do you think the Bills should draft this season in the 2022 draft?
Oh man, that's tough. I mean, there's a lot of players. There's a defensive lineman by the name of Davidson out of Georgia that I really like. He's somebody that I think could really pair well with Ed Oliver. Especially, we don't know quite yet if Harrison Phillips will be back. He is a free agent, so with a player like that, it'd be nice to have an addition to that, fearsome four that we're trying to build, as we've tried to build these last few years with Ed Oliver and AJ Epinesa and obviously Boogie Basham. So adding another piece to that puzzle could be Davidson out of Georgia. I really like the idea of adding more speed to the team. And Brandon Beane talked about that at the end of season press conference. He said, I'm paraphrasing here, but I think he said something to the gist of, if we could find another if you could find a Tyreek Hill, let me know where to find him. And I think from my vantage point, from what I've seen, if there's any one player that reminds me of Tyreek Hill, it's a guy by the name of Calvin Austin III. He's a Memphis Tigers wideout. Entering into the draft, he had 70-plus catches, 8 touchdowns, and over 1,100 yards receiving last year. And he's that speedy, dynamic, small receiver that I think can kind of sneak between the cracks. And that'd be a guy that I'd really like. He averaged 15 and a half yards per catch last year with the Tigers. So that's a name that really jumps out at me. And even last season, collegiately, 2020, he had over 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns. So he's somebody that I really like. And those are two guys that really jump out at me.
How do you think the Bills will get better at defending against the opposing team's run game?
Well, obviously too, getting bigger and more athletic up front is somebody that is something that I think they should do, whether it's at the defensive tackle spot or maybe even in the linebacker, area too, getting a little bit deeper there, rather than just having Edmonds and Milano. Maybe they add somebody at that position. Marlon Davidson is the name that I couldn't think of off the top of my head, but Marlon Davidson is the defensive lineman out of Georgia that I really like. And it's somebody that might not have been Marlon. I think that's his brother. It'll come to me, but there's a lot of room for improvement. Really, I think on the defense, something that I'm keeping my eyes out on is whether or not they draft another corner to kind of pair with Trey White, because Trey White is coming off an ACL injury, but even if he wasn't, I would want somebody alongside Trey White, because they do have some players that are up for grabs possibly in free agency, with Levi Wallace being a free agent. If they don't bring him in, he could test the market. They could lose him. He could be in high demand in free agency if he reaches that point. And if he does, then obviously, and he doesn't come to Buffalo, then obviously they'd have to replace him with someone as well. So really, I think building their strength on their defense is their secondary, which you have a solid secondary that can pass cover, tight ends, wide receivers. It allows more time for your front four to apply pressure on the quarterback. So really, I wouldn't leave any stone unturned at making this team better, because we got that window of opportunity that it could close at any point. Each year's a new year. There's teams that, look at Cincinnati. They won 4 games last year. They found themselves in the Super Bowl the next year. So you never know what to expect in the NFL. And anywhere and everywhere, just adding depth would be my philosophy this offseason for the Buffalo Bills.
Um, like, if you were the Bills coach, how would you coach the last 13 seconds of a game?
If you're referring to the, which I think you are, if you're referring to the Kansas City Chiefs game, um, my main thing with that is wondering whether or not, the 13 seconds I think was one thing that allowed them to tie that game, but really allowing them to tie it is one thing. What took place in overtime, I think, was just as bad, if not worse. Kansas City wins the coin toss. Neither defense was really stopping one another over the course of that game. So whoever won that coin toss was largely going to win the game. But just how he went about it, X's and O's wise, pretty much playing prevent defense, playing off, allowing Tyreek Hill to get space, allowing Travis Kelce to get space, and allowing Pat Mahomes essentially to just move right on down the field. That's something that can't happen in an opening overtime possession, especially, knowing that, hey, we lost that toss, we got to ensure that they don't get into the end zone. If we would have just held them to a field goal there on that opening drive in overtime, then Josh Allen would have had another shot to put it in the end zone. And I liked our chances at that, especially with how that game was going in the third and fourth quarter for us, the second half mainly for us. But that 13 seconds is what everyone is going to be living by and dying by, and I get it. But that 13 seconds to me, playing off again, they kind of carried over what happened in that 13 seconds into overtime. That to me is the most frustrating part. And I think to date, Sean McDermott has been a fantastic coach. I think largely this team wouldn't be where they are right now if it wasn't for Sean McDermott. Changing the culture and implementing his style defensively and just practicing what he preaches, and forcing it, allowing his players to do that too. Being as patient as he's been, over the course of his tenure here, kind of building this brick by brick. But I think that game largely falls on his shoulders as far as communication goes. Did he tell Tyler Bass to kick it through the end zone? Did he tell Tyler Bass to squib it? There's a lot of speculation as far as what he actually told Tyler Bass. Was there a miscommunication? Did Bass just mishear him? There's a lot of conspiracies as to what the heck happened with that kickoff that put Kansas City at their own 25 and left 13 seconds on the clock due to the fact that he kicked it through the end zone. So due to the fact that Bass, kicked it through the end zone. So had they squibbed it, a lot of people are saying they should have squibbed it, and you never know. We'll never know whether they should have or whether they shouldn't have. If that would have made a difference, if those extra 3 or 4 seconds would have made a difference, I'd like to think that it would have at least taken 2 plays away from the Chiefs, at least 2 plays. But it is what it is. I'm at a point now where I'm focused on the offseason. I'm thankful that the Kansas City Chiefs didn't make it to the Super Bowl, because that would have just rubbed more salt into the wound. And the fact that they lost to Cincinnati in the AFC Championship was a little bid of that humble pie. But then, knowing that they lost to Cincinnati, knowing that we would have hosted Cincinnati had we beat the Chiefs, I'd like to think that we would have beat the Bengals and played the Rams in the Super Bowl. Whether we would have beat them or not, we have no way of knowing. But it was a big missed opportunity, I think, this year. Unfortunately, this was the year to actually get back to the Super Bowl, but unfortunately, they weren't able to pull it off. And now we just hit the reset button and hope for the best as far as how they make this team better in 2022. And I think they can. They just have a few areas where they can add some depth and really be more potent, whether it's offensively or defensively, this upcoming season.
Where could my listeners or followers find you at?
Yeah, my listeners, or your listeners, I should say, could find me on Twitter at Ryan Thomas Take. And Robby, thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. You can find me on Twitter at Ryan Thomas Take, as well as on Instagram at Ryan Thomas Take. And my podcast is the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. It's on Facebook, YouTube, as well as Google Podcasts, as well as Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So you can find it pretty much anywhere you download your podcast. You can find my show. So I really appreciate everybody, showing their support for all of the Buffalo Bills content creators out there that are looking to have their own shows and put out their own ideas and their own opinions. And I love it. So thanks for the support. I really appreciate Bills Mafia.
Do you have any questions for myself?
Yeah, I do actually. I got a fun one. So I like to go back to like the nostalgia of when we were younger. I'm not sure how old you are. I'm 29. You might be a few years younger than me. But I wanted to ask you, what's the one moment that had you most excited growing up as a Bills fan? Which signing, which trade, which draft pick, or maybe all of the above? Which one of those had you most excited for the upcoming season from previous regimes and previous seasons?
Like when they signed Sean McDermott as the coach, and then like my second favorite would have to be when the Bills got Diggs.
Okay, so those are fairly. I mean, Sean McDermott's been there for 5 years now. Diggs, that was a couple years ago. Do you have any from like within the drought years that excited you?
Like when they brought in Fitzpatrick.
When they brought in Fitz, were you a Fitz guy? Were you a Ryan Fitzpatrick believer?
Yeah, I liked him.
Yeah. Now, Mitch Trubisky is going to be a free agent, and I've been reading a lot of things about Buffalo trying to keep him. They want him to stay. Let's just say Mitch signs with another team. There's rumors that the Saints, the Giants, and the Steelers are most interested in Mitch Trubisky. Would you want Ryan Fitzpatrick back in Buffalo as the QB2 of the Buffalo Bills?
I I would say I'd say like bring him back as the QB2 to Josh Allen.
You would approve of that move?
Yeah.
Yep. Awesome. Yeah. And as far as when Stephon Diggs was traded, where were you when you heard that news? Because that's one that everybody remembers where they were and how they heard it.
Um I I think I was with my dad somewheres and I just heard it on the radio.
That's cool. Were you excited when you first heard that news? Were you pumped up
Yeah, because I liked him when he was with the Vikings.
when he was with the Vikings? Yeah, and he had that Minneapolis Miracle touchdown against the Saints. You remember that?
Yeah, Case Keenum threw the ball over the middle to Diggs, and then he like tiptoed the sideline and got the touchdown.
Yeah, and what's his name? I don't remember the corner off the top of my head, but he fell as the ball was in the air, and Stephon Diggs just had green grass in front of him down the sideline. So that was something. I'll never forget that. That was kind of when the legend of Stephon Diggs began. But how are you feeling heading into this offseason? And how were you feeling after that Kansas City Chiefs loss?
I mean, I was feeling pretty good, but I mean, I knew like the Bills could beat Cincinnati at home if they got that far. And I feel pretty good about this upcoming season with Josh Allen and Diggs still here.
How did you play fantasy football?
Yeah,
How did you do in fantasy this year?
I finished in like seventh place.
Seventh. So not great, but not bad. You were right there in a 10-team league. You were right within the playoff hunt, right?
Yeah,
Did you have a fair share of injuries this year?
a few.
A few. Yeah. I had a few too. I lost on 1 week. I lost Derrick Henry, which that's never good. Because usually he's a first round pick, and I lost Calvin Ridley to his semi-retirement due to personal reasons and mental health and everything. Which I hope he comes back because he's such an awesome player. I love watching him play. I'd love it if somehow Buffalo had Calvin Ridley with Diggs, or if they had like a Hollywood Brown with Stephon Diggs. I'm hearing rumors that Hollywood Brown might be retiring to start like a gaming career. I don't know if those have been fully debunked yet, but that'd be something with a player as talented as him, calling it a career to just be a video game streamer. That's I've never heard of anything quite like that. It just shows the day and age that we're living in, and as far as what people are capable of with streaming. So shout out to him. That's pretty crazy. I've never heard of anything like that. So we'll see if that actually happens. But there's just so many, like to your question earlier too about that 13-second loss, just popping it back into my head. There's so many moments in that game that you can go back to in the first quarter, second quarter, where there were some missed opportunities that if those were field goals or if those were touchdowns, that 13 seconds would have never mattered. So it's it was a fantastic game. It's probably, from my opinion, probably the greatest game I've ever watched. And I hate that we were on the losing end of it because we were on the winning end of it in regulation up until they tied it and kicked it and tied it. But I know one thing's for sure. I think they're going to come back really motivated, and they're going to come back just hungry for more. And I'm hoping that they keep the team largely the same, but add just specific depth pieces along the way, whether it's a Calvin Austin III or a Davidson out of Georgia, or adding another corner to pair along Trey White. And I will say, for as much as I like Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, they are getting a little bit older. So I think it's time to maybe look into building for the future of that position too. But one guy that I really enjoyed, and you can maybe piggyback off of this, I want your take on this too, is Dawson Knox. He had a fantastic season, career year. What do you think of him heading into this next season?
I think that Dawson Knox was a good addition for the Bills. Like when they were looking for a tight end.
Yeah, and they were looking for a tight end for quite a long time. I see you have a Sabres flag behind you too, so you're obviously talking 1-6 Sports. Do you got any Sabres questions for me you want to shoot off? I wouldn't mind some of those.
Did you catch the game last night?
I did bits and pieces of it, not the whole thing, but bits and pieces of it I did.
Did you catch the game when the Sabres played and Jeff Skinner got 5 points?
I did. I caught that one. That was the last one I watched in its entirety, was the Skinner 4-goal game, 5-point game, as you said.
How do you think he's developing in the system of Don Granato?
Well, I'm really hoping, especially coming off that 5-point game, you look at that stat, you look at that day, night, whatever game whatever you want to call it, and what line was he on is the first thing I think. Who was on that line with him? Because obviously, hockey is a give and take game, pass or shoot game, and you have Jeff Skinner, Alex Tuck, and Tage Thompson, and Tage Thompson has had a fantastic season since Alex Tuck was activated from his shoulder injury and brought into the lineup. He's got 18 points in 16 games. So I'm hoping Don Granato, and I think he has, if I look at Lance Lykowski's tweet this morning in terms of the practices, Lance Lykowski tweeted that line is staying together as the top line of the Buffalo Sabres, which for me, that's perfect because I think Skinner with Tuck is fantastic as well. You add in Tage Thompson. Not many teams in the NHL have a young a young center, that is as big as Tage Thompson. That is a big, big man at the center position. I can't even say he's a man. He's like 20 years old. These are kids on this team. So, but he's a big, big kid, and he's only going to get bigger. And if Tage Thompson continues this too, like I've really enjoyed watching him play for us this year. If he continues to develop, that Ryan O'Reilly trade might not look so bad. If Tage Thompson ends up being a mainstay as a Buffalo Sabre for the next 10 or 15 years, that might not be such a bad trade after all. If they're able to get Tage Thompson, and there's another piece of that trade that hasn't seen the Sabres just yet, Ryan Johnson, who's in the Amerks organization, a defenseman. Of those two guys, Tage is obviously a legitimate, top line guy, first or second line center, depending on the night. But if Ryan Johnson can crack the Sabres lineup at some point this year or next year, that Ryan O'Reilly trade doesn't look so bad in hindsight, in my opinion.
Do you think that in the last game the Sabres had Victor Olofsson, do you think he's getting out of his drought?
Yeah, I hope so, and I hope it's not. He's getting out of his drought, and then they trade him. That's one thing I can't stand with the Sabres is that it seems like whenever a younger player starts to hit his stride within the roster on the Sabres, they trade him, and I think that's largely why they've been where they are these last 5, 10, 15 years. They're pushing 11 years with this playoff drought. They have so much young talent on the team already, so much young talent in the works. They've actually rebuilt and now rebuild again this team three separate times. But I think this time around with Kevin Adams, he's actually doing it the right way, and he's building their farm system, and he's building their team for the long haul. Because even when the Sabres were good, they were only good for a short time. There's only been like these blimps of greatness, where blips on the radar of greatness, where then it's just gone, in the blink of an eye. Those Chris Drury, Danny Briere years were a long time ago. I hate to say that because those were some of the best days of my life watching the Buffalo Sabres, but some of the best memories I've had too as a Buffalo sports fan. But that was 15 years ago, and now we're 11 years into a playoff drought since then, and you have a lot of questions that need to be answered as far as some of the players that are on the team, whether they'll be back. I think there's going to be a lot more turnover with some of these younger guys coming in. The Quinns, the Peterkas, the UPLs, the Eric Portillo, Devin Levi. They got 3 young goalies that are in the wings, waiting in the wings over the goalies that they have now. Craig Anderson, who'll probably retire at the end of the season. Dustin Tokarski, he's been pretty good, but he is what he is. I think he's like a 1B on a great day. I'm not sure if he's quite a starter. And then obviously Arundel largely has calmed down, but for the most part of the season, he was an utter disaster. So I hope next season, the new young blood is brought all the way up, and we can actually see the Sabres that we're meant to see for the present and the future next season.
What do you think of our goalie tandem, Anderson and Tokarski?
Well, like right now, I would say like Tokarski is doing pretty well, better than I thought he would do. And Craig Anderson is certainly doing a lot better than I thought he would do, given that he's almost at the tail end of his career. Most people thought he was going to retire last season. So, and he's been pretty good given the circumstances of their defense kind of being reshuffled a lot over the course of the season. So I think that the goalies now that we have on the Sabres, I think they're temporary. With all due respect to them, I think they're temporary because Devin Levi has been very, very good at the level that he's playing at right now. UPL is somebody that I really want to see get a lot of starts as the tail end of the season comes. I want to see him get as many starts as possible just to know where he's at heading into next year. Obviously, there were a lot of high expectations for him last season that he kind of didn't really hit and meet. And I think putting him back in Rochester. At one point, he was back up here for a little bit, and he did pretty well, but now he's back down in Rochester. I think that's actually really good for him. I just hope that by late March or mid March maybe he gets like 10 or 15 starts, to end the year and see where he's at and know that hey, he's at this point and he's heading into next season as one of the starters. And we'll have more of a viewpoint as far as where he's at for us.
Who do you think the Sabres would name as captain next season?
Man, that might be the toughest question yet. Man, I think there's something to the captain has to be somebody that really embodies what it means to wear the logo that he's wearing. You know what I mean? I think that's the biggest thing with a captain. I go back to Chris Jury when he was a captain here. He really didn't say a whole lot. He just led by example and led by action, and it allowed somewhat of a follow the leader type mentality where everybody started to just follow his lead and his example. A guy that I think makes a lot of sense for the captain would probably be Alex Tuch. He was the biggest piece of the Eichel trade, and he's somebody that really loves being a part of the Buffalo Sabres. He's from Syracuse. He was ecstatic when he got traded here, and I also think sometimes it doesn't always work out this way, but I also think he's one of, if not the best player on the team right now, just based on his talent. So I'd like to think that Tuch would be in consideration. I think Tage Thompson would be in consideration. Rasmus Dahlin would be in consideration, and I think Dylan Cousins would be in consideration as well. Any four of those guys, if they put the C on any of them next season, I would have no problem with it at all.
Who do you think won the Eichel trade?
Man, who do I think won the Eichel trade? I think given the circumstances, because that was a very messy situation, right? That was a very tough situation. I think given the circumstances of Eichel's tenure here and the injury that he had, that they didn't want him to have the surgery, the Sabres didn't want him to have the surgery, that he ultimately ended up getting with Vegas. He's making his debut for Vegas tonight after being out for the first 8 weeks of the year. I really think Buffalo did because Vegas is built for the short term. They don't have a lot of talent long term. I mean, in the pipeline. They have a lot of talent in the present, and they're building their team to make a Stanley Cup run this year and next. But if that doesn't happen, they're really on the outside looking in because they have a lot of money owed to a lot of these players, and they're going to have cap problems. They already do have cap problems. If you look at with Jack Eichel, they brought him on, they activated him, and they deactivated or injured reserve Mark Stone, which freed up $9 million, and then it activated Eichel, who's 10.5, and really they were able to make up the difference of that. So I'd rather be in a situation like the Sabres, in all honesty, where you get two players for one. You get Alex Tuch, who wants to be here, whereas I don't think Jack Eichel really ever did. That's another topic for another day, I think. A lot of people disagree with me on that, but I just, from my perspective, I never really saw the fit. And he wasn't really their guy. You go back to that time with McDavid and Eichel, they wanted McDavid, and they unfortunately lost the lottery, and they ended up with Eichel as a consolation prize. And people can say Eichel's talented, and he definitely is, but I don't even think he's even 1/10 the player that Connor McDavid is. And I think I got a lot of reasons for people to agree with me on that. So, but I think, two players, Alex Tuch, who really wants to be here and has really embraced the city and has embraced being a Buffalo Sabre and has really fit in to Donnie Granato's system as well as anyone has, I think, on this team in such a short amount of time. He's big. He's very quick for how big he is. He's strong due to his size, and he's smart in terms of his puck possession. And I really like Peyton Krebs. I think Peyton Krebs might be probably outside of Quinn and Paterka, like in Rochester, I think maybe even beyond those two, I'd say Peyton Krebs is their best young talent on the team. And we've seen that in these last few games. His passing is unbelievable. What he's been able to see before it happens and dish it before it's really available, really before anyone sees it take place. That's a skill in and of itself, an awareness that I think is rare in hockey. So I've really enjoyed it, and I'm really happy for them because I think they're both going to be playing a lot of minutes on a team that they might not have been playing as many minutes in Vegas, especially Krebs. I think he's playing more minutes here than he ever did in Vegas. So, yeah, I think Buffalo did win the trade. I think eventually, as time wears on, I could see Jack Eichel wearing on his welcome in Vegas as well. I just don't think he has the personality to really be a leader, or be, a face of a team. Some guys do, some guys don't. They say Sidney Crosby's a leader, but Evangeline Malkin really just wanted to play, and I think Eichel's just one of those guys that wants to play. He doesn't really want to be a leader, and that's not a bad thing. But for a city like Buffalo, we realize and recognize if someone wants to be here, you're embraced. Like you're embraced, you're fully embraced. Where if you don't want to be here, we don't want you here. I can only speak for myself and say if a player doesn't want to be here, whether it's Jack Eichel or Willis McGahee or some of these other guys that have badmouth Buffalo along the way, get to stepping. You can go, and we'll move on from you. That's fine. You have to be a special person, and I'll use this as an example. You have to be a Josh Allen type person to fit in here. I think Josh Allen's skill is one thing, but his personality, leadership, and his ability to embrace the community that he plays within, I think that's what sets him apart and made him really a mainstay of this team and Buffalo's favorite son, essentially.
Do you have any other questions?
I want to get your take. Where do you see the Sabres, finishing at the end of the year? Do you think they'll be a little bit better than what they were last year, or do you think they'll still be kind of bottom 10? In the bottom 10, I should say.
I think they might be like right in the bottom 10 this year, but then maybe next year, maybe they'll go up a little bit and get better like through the draft and like.
Yeah, and they got Owen Power coming too. He's not even on the team yet, so that'll be fun. And what do you think of Granato?
I think Don Granato is a good coach for what the Sabres are going through.
I agree. Would you say that he's the perfect coach for right now, especially?
I would say that.
Yeah, I agree. I like the way you said that for right now. I think maybe he's not the guy that leads them to a Stanley Cup. I won't go that far because he hasn't really been here that long. But I can say that I've seen improvement, and I've seen improvement not just on the ice, but off it. It seems like the guys are really enjoying being a part of the team because it is a team sport, and there's no I in team. Jack Eichel, talented player, no doubt, top 5 player, I think, in the game as far as his talent goes, but it just wasn't a fit. I think ultimately you could have put anybody alongside him, and I don't think that Buffalo Sabres crest on his jersey was what he ever wanted or what we ever really wanted. So, moving on, and I like the guys we got, and I'm very excited for the future of the Sabres. I'm, of course, more excited to run this next football season back with the Bills. I think we're a top 3 team in the league, and we'll be back. No doubt about it. We're going to be running some teams over. I think they're going to have a big chip on their shoulder next year. I think their offense is going to be more balanced with Ken Dorsey as the OC now instead of Brian Dable. And I think that Josh Allen is going to have the best year that a Buffalo Bills quarterback has ever had again, because he's already done it once, twice, and I think he's going to do it a third time in even better form and fashion.
I think he will too.
Yep. Thinking 4,500 yards, 50 touchdowns. I'm thinking big MVP, game-changing crazy solid year for the Bills. I'm expecting that in droves this next season.
Do you have any other questions before I wrap this up?
No, I'm all good actually. You answered all my questions, and I really appreciate having me on, Robby. This was fun.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Of course, yeah, and keep up the great work with the show. Stay at it, and keep talking 716 sports.
Thank you for tuning into Let's Talk 716 Sports. Thank you to my special guest, Ryan Thomas, and let's go Buffalo.
Let's go Buffalo.